My daughter doesn't need those outdated things. Julian Croft's voice struck through the room, cold and sharp like a command. Elena froze. In her arms, little Seraphina was swaddled, her tiny eyelids twitching as the lullaby had just begun to drift into the air. Elena tried to keep her voice steady. I was only singing to help her sleep. She seems calmer when she hears it. Julian stepped forward, his shadow stretching across the floor. His hand clenched into a fist, his tone slicing like a blade. No folk lullabies, no colorful raps. I pay you to care for her, not to bring superstition into this house. Elena lowered her head, yet her arms tightened protectively around the baby. Her heart raced, but when she saw Seraphina's lips faintly quiver, she couldn't hold back. She hummed a few soft notes, her voice trembling, heavy with emotion. Julian frowned, turning away, as though he could snuff out the sound on the spot. In the hallway, a servant passed by, catching a glimpse through the door before quickly bowing. Her head. Everyone knew. In the Croft mansion, the master's word was law. But then Seraphina whimpered. Her tiny lips moved, her hand reached out, as if trying to cling to the song floating in the air. Elena cradled her tighter, tears brimming in her eyes. In that fleeting moment, she understood. There was something in this lullaby, in the warmth of these arms, that no machine could ever replace. And so, in the charged silence, a question lingered like a blade hanging above them. What truly has the power to awaken life in a child? Cold technology or the tender warmth of a simple lullaby? Elena Washington had never imagined herself working as a servant in a mansion so vast, but when the steel gates closed behind her, she knew she had no other choice. She was a young woman from a small seaside community in South Carolina, what people called the Low Country. There, lullabies and hand-woven gullah cloth had nurtured entire generations. Elena carried both with her when she came to the city, a vibrant hand-embroidered cloth from her mother, and the voice that had once soothed her younger sister through fevered nights. Are you sure you can handle this? The woman in human resources had asked during the interview. Elena nodded firmly. As long as it pays. My sister needs medicine. That was the truth. Her sister lay bedridden in Charleston, medical costs rising every day. Elena had come to New York with nothing but a worn canvas bag, a few clothes, and the heirloom cloth. The Croft mansion was unsettling in its silence. Everything gleamed, spotless, as if no one truly lived there. People said billionaire Julian Croft spent most of his time locked away in his office, while his daughter, Seraphina, lay quiet in a room filled with machines. She doesn't cry, she doesn't laugh, one maid whispered as she led Elena upstairs. Just lies there like a doll. Mr. Croft calls the best doctors, buys the newest equipment, but she let the sentence trail off, her eyes darting down the empty corridor. When the nursery door opened, Elena saw a tiny girl, eyes open but vacant. There were no babbles, no fidgeting, only a small body tethered to wires and blinking monitors. Elena swallowed hard. She gently placed her folded cloth near the crib. Immediately, a nurse frowned. Not allowed. Mr. Croft doesn't like colorful things. Everything here must be sterile. Elena nodded and pulled her hand back. But when the nurse left, she softly stroked the baby's cheek and whispered, Sweetheart, let me sing to you for just a moment. Her voice rose in a tender, trembling lullaby. And something unexpected happened. Seraphina's eyelids fluttered. Her tiny fingers curled, searching in the air until they brushed against Elena's blouse. Elena froze. The room was still except for the beep of machines, but in that instant she believed she had witnessed a spark of life. The next day, Julian Croft walked in just as Elena was humming. His face hardened, his words cutting across the air. I told you already. No singing. My daughter needs science, not folklore. Elena bowed her head. But sir, she responded, Enough, Julian snapped. I don't want to hear another word. If it happens again, you can pack your things. He slammed the door behind him, leaving Elena shaken. Her hands trembled as she held the baby. Seraphina sank back into silence, unmoving. In the kitchen, whispers began to spread. Did you see? The Croft girl only stirred when that woman sang. Dangerous. If the master finds out, she won't last. But maybe it's real. Elena heard it all. She knew every gaze upon her carried both caution and pity. One evening, as she washed the cloth, an older maid approached. Child, she murmured, be careful. Mr. Croft believes in nothing but money and machines. But I've seen it. The little one needs you. Elena gripped the cloth, her chest heavy. Each thought of her ailing sister made her feel an even stranger bond with Seraphina. Both were fragile. Both clung to the warmth of someone who stayed. During a routine check, the doctor once again shook his head. No progress. Condition unchanged. Julian stood motionless, face expressionless, though the file in his hands crumpled under his grip. When the doctor left, Elena gathered her courage. Sir, may I sing to her each night? Just a few minutes. It doesn't harm her. Julian turned, his stare like a blade. I hired you to care for her, not to experiment. With superstitions. I've warned you once already. Elena opened her mouth, but the weight of his glare silenced her. She bowed instead, holding the child close. That night, when the house was asleep, Elena sat alone by the crib. Seraphina lay still, her hollow eyes fixed on the ceiling. Elena clasped the baby's hand and sang softly. Sleep now. The ocean still whispers. Her voice cracked, tears falling onto the child's cheeks. But this time, something strange occurred. Seraphina's face twitched, her lips quivering as if to answer. Elena sat frozen, heart pounding wildly. She knew she wasn't imagining it. The child was reaching for something. The next day, Julian appeared unexpectedly. He lingered outside the door, not entering, only watching. Elena, unaware, kept singing, and Seraphina's eyelids trembled. Her small hand reached again for Elena's blouse. Julian stood rooted. He scowled, tried to shake it off, then turned and walked away briskly, footsteps thudding against the polished wood. Elena grew increasingly attached to the child. Each song felt like an invisible thread weaving between them. Yet the fear pressed harder. She knew if Julian caught her again, her position would vanish. At supper, a young servant whispered, They say Mr. Croft is bringing in another doctor. He thinks money can cure everything. Elena said nothing. She only clutched the cloth tighter, as if drawing strength from her mother and the generations of Gula women before her. She knew more clearly than ever. This love had once saved her sister, and now it had to reach Seraphina. But would Julian allow it, or crush it completely? That night, the wind howled against the thick glass windows, rain pounding the mansion walls like relentless drums. Elena was folding the cloth when Seraphina's monitor shrieked in alarm. The piercing sound tore through the house, making everyone flinch. She rushed in. The screen flashed red, numbers plummeting as if thrown down a cliff. Respiratory levels crashed. The baby's skin turned bluish, her tiny chest rising in weak, uneven gasps. The jagged beeps pulsed like a death knell. No. Please, not now, Elena whispered, her trembling hand pressing against the child's fragile chest. A nurse stormed in, fumbling with equipment, her voice breaking into panic. Doctor, hurry! Her hand shook so violently that she dropped the stethoscope. Julian burst through the door, his shirt wrinkled, face ashen. His eyes darted desperately between his daughter and the monitor, breath ragged. What the hell is happening? The doctor scrambled, attaching more tubes, voice strained. Her lungs are too weak. The medication, it's no longer working. Julian roared, slamming his hand against the bed rail. Do something! I don't pay you to stand there! He paced back and forth, fists clenched so tight that veins bulged beneath the skin. Minutes dragged in unbearable tension. Every effort collapsed into nothing. Finally the doctor stopped, sweat dripping, his head bowed. "We've tried everything." The room froze in dreadful silence. Only the storm outside hammered on, and the faint, faltering breaths of a child on the brink. Elena stood rooted, her heart splintering. A vision of her sister flashed back, blue lips, shallow breaths, yet saved by warmth and song. Her voice broke through the silence. "Give her to me." Julian spun, eyes blazing. "Are you insane?" But Elena didn't wait. She bent down and, with a mix of gentleness and defiance, lifted Seraphina from the machines. The small body was cold, drenched in sweat, heavy like lead in her arms. She wrapped the child in the bright cloth, holding her close to her chest. Her voice cracked yet carried unshaken resolve. "Sleep now. I'm right here." The song trembled out, soaked in tears. She pressed the baby's face against her chest, letting her heartbeat thrum against the failing rhythm inside that fragile frame. Julian lunged forward, his hand reaching to seize the child. "Put her down, now!" His voice rose, but then something extraordinary happened. A faint whimper slipped through, so soft the nurse leaned in to hear. Seraphina stirred. Her eyelids flickered. She drew in a shaky, unmistakable breath. The flat lines on the screen shifted into slow, steady waves. The nurse gasped, hand clamped over her mouth. "Oh my God! She's breathing again!" Elena sobbed openly, her song breaking apart into desperate notes. "I'm here. Don't leave me." The little girl arched, her tiny hand clutching the edge of the cloth. And then, for the very first time in her life, Seraphina cried. The sound wasn't loud, but it pierced the room, shrill and fierce, slicing through years of sterile silence. Everyone froze. The doctor staggered back. The nurse wept. The butler dropped the glove in his hand. Julian went motionless. His eyes shook, fists whitening at the knuckles. That sound. He had prayed every day to hear it. Yet it had come from the arms of the nanny he had threatened to fire. "Impossible," he muttered, lips quivering. Elena clutched the baby, tears streaming. "She needs love. She needs to feel someone is here for her." Julian stiffened, shadows clouding his eyes. For a split second, the ghost of his late wife flickered before him. The memory of her cold hand slipping away as she whispered, he must protect their child. He remembered screaming in the white glare of that hospital room, pouring everything, money, power, his very heart, into keeping Seraphina alive. But then heat flushed his face. His fists tightened, voice shaking with rage and grief. "What do you know about love?" He turned sharply to the butler, shouting, his voice splintering. "Get her out! At once!" Elena raised her head, voice hoarse but unyielding. "Don't you see?" she breathed again. "You heard her cry," Julian thundered back. "It's nothing but a fleeting reaction. I will not let my daughter depend on meaningless superstitions." The butler hesitated, edging forward to take the baby. But the moment he touched her, Seraphina wailed, a piercing cry so sharp it split the air. She writhed, clinging to the cloth with desperate fists. The nurse stammered, wide-eyed. "Never, never has she reacted this strongly." Julian stood, frozen, his face pale. He watched his daughter struggle, saw her tiny hands gripping the cloth, saw Elena holding her firm. His shoulders quivered. For an instant something fragile flickered within him. But he ground his teeth, voice hardening. "Enough. You'll be gone. At sunrise." Elena pulled the baby close, tears spilling without end. She knew this moment had changed everything, but it might also strip her of the only job that kept her sister alive. Later that night, after the others had left, Elena sat alone. Seraphina slept, her breathing steadier, her small hand still clutching the soaked cloth. Elena gazed down at her face, whispering, "If this is the last night I can be with you, I'll keep singing until you truly know you are not alone." Out, in the corridor, Julian stood hidden in the shadows. He heard the faint lullaby drifting through the crack in the door. That cry still echoed in his ears. The first cry of his daughter, not summoned by machines, but by a voice. He closed his eyes. His trembling hand braced against the wall, his forehead pressed against cold wood, breath ragged. Then he clenched his fist and turned away, his footsteps striking hard against the floor. Would Julian truly cast Elena out, or had that first cry forced him to face a truth he could no longer deny? Morning came. Elena sat by the small bed, folding her meager belongings. She opened her old canvas bag. Inside were only a few clothes and a crumpled hospital bill. Her eyes blurred as they stopped on the words, "Payment due." Her hand shook as it brushed the bright cloth. "If I leave, how will I pay for my sister's medicine?" she whispered, shuddering. But then Seraphina's image surged into her mind, the child's first cry in her arms. Even if she lost her job, even if she had to start over, Elena knew, if given the chance again, she would still do everything as she had last night. In the back kitchen, near the wine cellar, several servants huddled, whispering, "Did you hear? Last night the young mistress almost died. Doctors, nurses, helpless, yet that black nanny with nothing but a bright cloth and a lullaby, she saved her." Another gaped. "Really? A song did that?" A third cut in, firm. "I saw it with my own eyes. She held the girl, wrapped her in the cloth, and sang. The child cried out immediately." Someone else lowered their voice, suspicious. "But doesn't that sound like witchcraft? What if the cloth was treated with something? If doctors failed, how could a nanny succeed?" Murmurs swirled. "True, maybe so. Those Gullah people dabble in superstition." Twisted rumors spread through the once silent house. Julian, heading down to fetch wine, heard every word. His face darkened. His grip on the bottle tightened until the glass groaned under his fingers. Humiliation surged in his chest. And then Elena's words from last night echoed. "She needs love." His heart clenched, jaw grinding until pain shot through his temples. Since his wife's death, every ounce of love had been poured into his daughter, in the way he believed was right. And now a nanny dared claim it wasn't enough? The fury that had simmered all night ignited, fed by the sting of rumor. "They think I'm a fool. They think my daughter has been bewitched by a rag." The final straw. Julian hurled the bottle to the ground. Glass shattered, sending the servants scattering in terror. Without a word, he stormed toward Elena's room. The door flew open. Elena startled, the cloth slipping from her hands. Julian stormed in, face flushed, fists trembling but tight. He snatched the cloth up, voice cutting like steel. "This is what has turned me into a laughingstock." Elena stepped forward quickly. "Sir, it isn't." "Silence," he roared. "I've poured millions into doctors, into machines, and now they say my daughter lives because of a rag and a superstitious chant. I'll end this charade today." He yanked a lighter from his pocket. A flame sparked, flickering in his furious eyes. Elena lunged, collapsing to her knees, arms outstretched to block him. Tears streamed down her face. "Please don't. You don't understand what this means. This isn't just a cloth. It's my mother's legacy, a piece of generations of Gullah women. Every stitch is a lullaby, a belief, a memory, a way we held on to life through poverty and loss. You have no right to burn it." Julian's teeth ground, his glare blazing. "Memories don't save lives. Only science does." At that moment, the nurse entered carrying Seraphina for her check. The instant the baby saw Julian holding the cloth with a flame, she wailed, arms reaching toward Elena. "No!" Elena cried, racing to snatch the child. Seraphina buried her face in her chest, tiny fingers clutching the cloth. Each time Julian tugged, the baby screamed harder, her cries echoing through the hushed mansion. The nurse stammered, shaken. "Sir, the young mistress has never reacted like this." The butler, silent until now, stepped forward. His aged eyes glinted with resolve. "Sir," his voice rasped but steady, "I remember the night the mistress passed. You held her hand and swore to protect the child at any cost. Look closely. Perhaps this is the very way she wished the girl to be protected." He paused, his tone deepening. "In all my years here, never once has the young mistress cried. Not the finest doctor moved her. But last night, and now, only in this woman's arms has she made a sound?" His voice dropped, sharp as a blade. "If you burn the only thing that stirs her to life, can you truly be certain?" "She'll cry again when she needs saving?" Julian faltered. The lighter trembled in his hand, flame wavering. His daughter's cries pounded into his chest, ripping through his pride. For a fleeting instant, he was back in that blinding white hospital room, his wife's cold hand slipping away forever. Then reality pulled him back. Seraphina, sobbing, clinging to Elena as if for life itself. This woman was no threat. She held the child as though she were her own. Julian's breath caught. If it were harm, why had her voice brought forth the first cry? If it were deceit, why did the child cling to her while her own father never could? The flame died. The lighter slipped from his grip, clattering against the floor. His voice cracked, hoarse. "Perhaps it is I who've been blind all along." Silence pressed in. Seraphina whimpered softly, still nestled in Elena's arms, her tiny fist gripping the cloth as if it were her heartbeat. Julian stood still, face rigid, but his eyes softened. He turned, shoulders stiff, hiding the tear that had escaped. Elena held the child tight, her own heart racing. She did not know if this was the beginning of change or merely the pause before another storm. Julian had dropped the lighter, but had he truly changed, or merely yielded for a moment to his daughter's cry? That afternoon, Elena had already packed her suitcase, tucked neatly into the corner of the room. The space, once cold, now felt emptier than ever, like her own heart. She sat on the edge of the bed, gazing at Seraphina, sleeping soundly, the child's tiny hand still clutching the colorful cloth, refusing to let go even for a moment. Elena leaned down, kissed her forehead softly, and whispered, "I have to go, but you will always be in my heart." She took a deep breath, stood, and reached for the suitcase. The door creaked, but in that instant Seraphina cried out, eyes wide with tears, arms thrashing, searching. Elena froze. The suitcase slipped from her hand and thudded onto the floor. Julian, standing in the hall, stopped in his tracks. He saw it with his own eyes. The baby wasn't reaching for a doctor, nor for her father, but crying, arms outstretched only for Elena. An hour later in the medical room, the doctor frowned, shaking his head. "We've checked. The numbers on the machines haven't changed. But the truth is undeniable. The young mistress stabilizes only when Elena is with her. The moment she is apart, the condition deteriorates." Julian collapsed into a chair, his hand covering his face. Years of faith, in the best doctors, in the most expensive machines, shattered by one unyielding truth. His daughter lived only when Elena was near. He remembered that morning, the small hand gripping the cloth, the cry that tore him open. And now before his very eyes, the little girl nestled against Elena's chest, breathing steady, color returning to her cheeks. There was no more denying. That evening, when the house was hushed, Julian went to the nanny's room. The door was open. Elena sat there, cradling Seraphina, singing softly. Her voice was warm, trembling, yet it filled the room with peace. She startled when she saw him. "If you want me to leave, I'll go now." Julian stood still for a long moment, then spoke, his voice hoarse. "No, I want you to stay." Elena's eyes widened in disbelief. He stepped closer, his gaze lingering on his daughter in her arms, his eyes glistening. "I was wrong. I thought my love was enough. But the truth is, it never was." His voice broke. Since his wife's death, he had poured everything into medicine and machines, forgetting that a child needed warmth, arms, and song. Elena hugged the baby tighter. Tears slid down her cheeks, but for the first time, she no longer trembled. A few days later, an announcement stunned the mansion. Elena would remain, no longer a temporary nanny. More than that, Julian declared he would cover all medical expenses for her sister in Charleston. Elena asked, her voice shaking, "But why would you do this?" Julian looked at Seraphina, who was giggling with the edge of the cloth in her hands, and answered softly, "Because if I don't honor what saved my daughter's life, I have no right to call myself her father." Time passed, and Seraphina grew stronger. No longer motionless like a doll, she began to smile, even to call out "Mama" when looking at Elena. Each time she heard it, Elena laughed and cried at once. Julian sat silent, but in his eyes the harshness melted, replaced by gratitude. With the support he gave, Elena founded a child care center. There, doctors and nurses worked, but so did mothers who sang lullabies, with gula cloths hangings proudly on the walls. People began to call it therapy of the spirit, a union of science and tradition. Weeks later, Julian appeared at a major press conference. Dozens of cameras pointed at him. He stepped to the podium, Seraphina in his arms. His voice was deep, trembling yet strong. "My daughter was saved, not only by technology or money. She was saved by a black woman I once dismissed, and by the heritage she carried. Today I admit, I was wrong, and I will never forget it." The hall fell silent, then erupted in thunderous applause. Elena sat in the back row, her eyes blurred with tears. She knew this was more than the transformation of one man. It was recognition for the entire Gula community, for the women who had woven cloths, sung lullabies, and kept love alive through generations. When the press conference ended, Elena carried Seraphina outside. The child laughed, clutching the old cloth tightly. Julian walked behind them, his eyes glowing with a tenderness never seen before. For the first time, the mansion no longer felt like a fortress, but like a home. This story reminds us of something simple that adults too often forget. A child does not live on machines, medicine, or money alone, but on arms, warmth, and love. Julian Croft once believed he could buy his daughter's life with technology. But in the end, what saved Seraphina was a humble cloth and the lullabies of a woman he once underestimated. The lesson is clear. There are things money will never buy. The cry of a child, the laughter of innocence, the bond of true love. And what about you? What do you believe nurtures a child more? Cold machines or a heart that truly loves? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, like and share to spread the message. And don't forget to subscribe to Toch Story for more moving stories to come. Because sometimes a single act of love can save an entire life.